race. How to finish the race. It's one thing to begin, it's quite another thing to finish. And there is no point entering a race unless you are intending to finish it. And that's particularly true of the Christian race. And because the image of a race is used more than once in the New Testament, talking about the Christian life. How to finish the race. When one of Jonty's cars starts their particular races, they hope to finish. They don't always, but then that's true of many other teams and cars too. But it's this new season. So that checkered flag they want to see during that race come down on them, and we want to finish our Christian race. We didn't start the Christian race intending not to finish it. We didn't get baptized thinking that it was going to be a temporary phase and we were going to opt out at a later date. So the question is, how can we do our best to be prepared and equipped to finish the race? And the book of Hebrews gives us a lot of good inspiration about that. We need the right information. We need the right help. I was listening recently to a Confessions. Do you listen to the Confessions podcast, the Confessions on Radio 2? Yeah. Do you ever listen to those? They're very, very funny. I listened to one recently. This is Simon Mayo doing his afternoons program. And one chap had entered a marathon for the very first time, his very first marathon. And he was very excited about it. And he took some advice from an uncle of his who'd done many marathons. And he said one of the things they do at these races is they give out gel on these races. So if you're getting tired partway along, you grab this nutrition gel and you squeeze it in and you eat it. And he's like, okay, I'll get that. At one point in the race, he's getting particularly tired. He sees these people by the side of the road holding some substance out, a gel-like substance in their hands. And so he runs past and takes it out of the hand, stuffs it in his mouth, starts to chew and swallow, and realizes it's not nutrition gel. It's the sort of petroleum jelly you use to smear on yourself where bits of you are rubbing and causing pain. And so he then brought it back up and stumbled and knocked another runner over, and it was a disaster. It's one thing to be in the race, but what will keep us going? We need to get the right stuff in to keep us going. And what we could say that in church life, just attending church isn't the thing that will keep you going. Just being on a membership, just having your birthday on Karen's list, it's not. Although that's vitally important for everyone's salvation, but the outer things of the Christian life are what many people depend on. And though these things are helpful, they're not the things that are the actual nutrition to keep us going, to help us to finish the race. And so let's read our chapter, and then we'll dig into a few things that I hope may help us tonight so that we can all finish the race. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his sons? He says, my son, and I think we'll take it here as son and daughter, right? My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as a son. endure hardship as discipline, God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplined us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and your weak knees, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Afterward, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected. Even though he sought the blessing with tears, he could not change what he had done. You've not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word would be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time, his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire. What a great chapter. Powerful stuff in there. And we'll touch on a bit of it at least tonight. So, first of all, we see our writer inspiring the early Christians. Now, these early Christians, we know they have faced particularly tough times. It looks like some even tougher times might be coming. They haven't had a martyrdom yet. He says you haven't shed your blood yet. So they've not seen their members killed in persecution, but perhaps he's saying, but this may well be coming. So, and they appear to have pulled back from their original levels of commitment and devotion. That seems to be the context. So he gives them some inspiration. And Heinrich spoke on Sunday about Hebrews chapter 11 and all the great heroes and heroines of the faith in chapter 11. And that's part of the inspiration. So we have what I like to think of as all my faithful friends. You know that verse from Anchor for the Soul. And I really like that. When the day is gone, when my journey ends, won't be nothing better than to be together with all my faithful friends. And that's us, and that's those who've gone before us. We'll all join in song, gathered round the throne, like the angels mentioned in this chapter. There'll be no more sorrow someday, when tomorrow heaven is our home. So we're looking forward to that. And he's saying there are some already there waiting for you, and you'll be with them. Just hang on, because it's going to be worth it. So we got the inspiration of all our faithful friends. And I think what he's trying to get across is it's a bit like a relay race. That's the kind of race you're in, where you've had people, you've had the runners of Hebrews chapter 11 before you, and perhaps some of their former members who've died, though not martyred, but nonetheless have already died in Christ. And they've passed the baton on to you. You're now running the race. You will finish your part of the race, but you'll pass the baton on to somebody else. So you've got to do your part in the race so that others can run their part in the race. And that's really important for those of us who've been around a while as Christians, that we bear in mind it's not just about us, but it's about the legacy we leave. It's about those who are 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years younger in Christ than us. The younger Christians, those maybe who could come into positions of leadership or use their gifts to strengthen the church and reach out to the lost and help the poor and all the good things that we want to do to build to help build God's kingdom and show what it is on this earth. And so I just want to say before we go on, it's important. You may not think you're that important, but you are. You can have an influence on the next generation. It's important for us to pray about that and think intentionally about who am I helping? Who in that next generation? It might be one of the teenagers of whose parents we have next door, but it might be someone in their 20s or 30s or 40s, depending on our age and their age as a Christian. We can all pass on what we have, and we pass the baton on. I mean, I turned 57 last week, and as you know, and thank you for birthday wishes and all that, it's very kind. And as I get a little older, I'm closer to 60. I mean, I'm thinking more and more about passing the baton on, because it seems to be getting heavier in my hand. I think I'm just getting weaker, right? I've got to strengthen my feeble knees, but it does seem to be getting heavier, and I'm now it's 10 years till my official retirement. You know, the official retirement age, 67 for me. So 10 years doesn't seem that long, actually. Now I've lived 5 decades. So, but we should all be thinking about that, passing it on. Anyway, he uses the past example there, and it's like a relay race. And then he talks about Jesus and the classic verse that really is the focus of the whole book in a way. Fix your eyes on Jesus. You've got all this going on, you've got all that happening, you're worried about this, you're afraid about that. Fix your eyes on Jesus. And so he uses the example of the faithful friends and of Jesus. I think of it a bit like the rowers who are fixed on the coxswain at the back there. You know, those bellowing instructions about how to row. And you know, they yell really loudly, and they often have loud hailers, or these days even loudspeaker things and microphones in the boat. And if you've ever had the misfortune of catching it like the boat race on the Thames, and you have the misfortune, I say, of hearing what they're actually saying, it's a bit fruity, shall we say. And the language is a little rough, but they are doing everything they can to motivate these people to row like crazy. And the rowers will do well, and they will finish their race if they keep their eyes on the cox, on the one guiding the boat. And I think that's for us in a way. As a church, we collectively keep our eyes on Jesus, will end up going in the right direction. They're facing backwards. They can't see the right way to go. Have you ever tried to ride your bicycle while looking over your shoulder? I mean, it is not a good idea, right? Or even running, looking over your shoulder. And it's the same thing for us. If we're always worried about what's coming and what might happen and what's in the future, we'll get off course. If we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus as he takes us into the future he has chosen for us, we'll be going in the right direction. It might be choppy waters, but that's okay if we're with Jesus. He walked on water anyway, so what are we worried about? So I think it's a bit like that, what he's saying to these people. And he's wanting them to run this race with perseverance. In other words, it's not about the speed. It's not about the speed you run. I know Albert's been doing his training for the races he's doing, and he's measuring everything in his body electrically that can be measured. And it's very impressive. And that's okay in that kind of race. You want to train for that. But our race isn't a competitive race. We're not trying to get there at a particular time. We just need to plod on. Some of us feel like we're plodders. You know, that's okay. Some of us like to sprint. That's okay. But we just need to keep going. Perseverance is the key here, not speed. It's not about the speed, and it's not about the terrain. There are some places you can run and which are a lot more pleasant to run in than others. I personally would not want to run around in snow with a backpack on my back, you know, the sort of thing that you do in training for the Royal Marines or something. I mean, that's not my idea of fun. Some of you will, because most of us will know Rick Mobbs, who used to be in the territorial SAS. And I was once asking him about his highs and lows, his best days in his life and his worst days in his life. And he started to describe this day, 3 days of training in the SAS, where they ran a marathon one day with a backpack and a rifle, and they ran effectively 2 marathons the next day and 3 marathons the next day. Yes, and you had to finish within 24 hours. And some of the people that didn't finish were thrown off. That's it. You can't be in the SAS. And he told me about the blisters and the pain and how the medics pumped them full of painkillers and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, it was brutal he's in Derbyshire, the Peak Districts. It was up and down, hills and dales. It wasn't flat. And he finished this whole story about this 3 days of torture. And I assumed, man, that must be one of the worst days in your life. And he said, no, that was my best day ever. And okay. I'm more convinced than ever that he is not a human being. He is a cyborg. But that was one of his best days ever. But you see, and here's the thing, that terrain suited him. That brought the best out of him. Your terrain of your Christian life might be different from mine. Your challenges may be different. You may have longer, smoother patches or more bumpy patches. You might have hotter weather or colder weather. I mean, I don't know how far to stretch the metaphors, but you understand what I'm saying. That we all run a slightly different race in terms of its conditions. But as long as we keep our eyes on Jesus, we can all finish the race. As long as we all persevere, we can finish the race. And that's all he wants them to do. Not to worry about the speed, not to worry about what they're going through, but to keep their eyes on Jesus, because that will make it work for them, which is the important point. So let's talk about some bits and pieces. I rather like this picture because the poor runner looks absolutely exhausted. And then there's standing next to that sign, sign up again today. It doesn't look like that she wants to. I don't know whether she would or not. But here's the thing is, as we go into the detail here for a few moments, it's really important that we learn how to enjoy our race. Yeah. Otherwise, no one else is going to sign up for the race. If we're the kinds of Christians who our neighbors and friends think, well, I appreciate the sincerity of their faith, but I don't want it because they look haggard and drawn and fed up and miserable, and they don't like their life and they don't like what's going on, and they're running some kind of race, but it looks like a nightmare race. They're not going to sign up for it. And I look to myself sometimes and I think, I wonder whether my neighbors think, actually, I have a good race I'm running, whether I'm enjoying it, whether I think it's good and right, and whether anything good is going to come out of it. And this is another reason why he wants them to fix their eyes on Jesus. Because if they look at their circumstances, they might get down in the mouth. They might get miserable. And we have plenty of things to complain about. And I'm not going to ask you what they are. But you can write a long list of things that aren't right. You know, your left toe hurts, and your mum doesn't like your husband, and your boss is mean, or is there something to talk about there, Peju? No, okay. We can write a long list. But if we get focused on those things, we're not going to enjoy the race, and we're not going to run it in the right sense, and we're not going to be attractive to other people. So that's why these things matter so much. So let's talk a bit about healthy hearts need hardship. Not a pleasant teaching, but a true teaching. And so he says, in your struggle against sin, you've not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood, which seems to indicate that may be around the corner. And of course it was for many Christians in the first and second centuries. You've forgotten this word of encouragement. Yes, you get disciplined, but it's because God loves you and because you are a true child. The illegitimate children in that culture got no education, they got no training, they got no discipline, because they were not going to get any inheritance. But the children that were going to get inheritance, they were trained, they were educated. And what God is doing with discipline, he's educating you and me how to live the Christian life. It's all education. It's all training, and it's all by a God who truly, truly loves us. Our fathers did their best. This is something we need to trust. As my father on his wedding day, 1958, it's their 60th wedding anniversary in July this year. My father did his best, and I had to wrestle with this, and I'm not sure if I'll leave this on the video, but I had to wrestle with this because, no, but it's like all sons and daughters, you grow up, and at some point you think, oh, hang on, why did they do that? That wasn't right. And you begin to evaluate the parenting of your parents, right? And you begin to see all the faults, or at least you think you see all the faults. And then you vow you will never do that with your children. And then you probably actually do exactly the same. But that we start to evaluate, and I was in my 20s, I had one view, my 30s I had another view. When I read some books, I had another view. When I had some counseling, I had another view. I should probably have a different view in another few years' time. But I have to accept the fact that my father did his best. And he did. And I love my dad very much, and he absolutely was and is a wonderful father. He didn't have a father growing up. His father died when my father was 3. Never knew his father. His mother never remarried. He had a very helpful uncle in his life that was a big help, but it wasn't the same, obviously. And that had meant that my father had some challenges understanding how to be a father to me, and that's understandable. And I have to say, he did his best, and he did. And I just want to say that to all of us, that some of us have mixed feelings about our upbringing, and that's understandable. But I think we need to give grace to our parents because they were doubtless doing their best, even if it wasn't as good as we would have hoped. But then we've got to be sober about our own failings too, haven't we? So my father did his best, but here's the thing, our God is perfect. We must not judge God by our own parenting experiences. If God withholds something, it's not because he's mean. It's not because he doesn't know that we really need that. He does know exactly what we need. He never makes a mistake with you and me in his parenting of us. He is the perfect parent, and he does it out of love. And we do well to pay attention to him and his disciplining. Jonty and I have a similar problem with neck pain, and one of with my neck pain, my vertebrae or whatever it is, the discs here aren't doing what they're meant to. I take a medicine called gabapentin, and that keeps the pain at a reasonable level. Recently I part changed to this particular medication called amitriptyline to see if it might actually be a little bit better for me. And I read the leaflet that comes with the medicine. I normally don't bother. No, I normally don't bother. But for some reason, I did read this with all the possible side effects, and it's a long list. And one of them said, "Don't drink alcohol and take the pill. Risk of death." It said. I thought. It's the drug companies covering themselves, okay? It's not gonna. So a few nights ago, Penny was away with her mother, and I had a beer. I had some homebrew, and it was it wasn't a massive amount, but it was a reasonable amount of beer. I had a beer quite late at night, just before I took this pill. I took the pill. I went to bed. I had a trip. I mean, I've never had a drug-induced trip, but I must assume that's what it was, because it was an out-of-body experience. I couldn't sleep. My heart was going like this. I was seeing visions. I mean, it was really weird. I didn't write down the vision. Oh no, maybe it was God. Maybe it was not. It was a bizarre experience. I slept hardly a wink. I think it was Monday night was in. I was wrecked the next day. I thought, I am not doing that again. And for obvious reasons, it was such a strange thing. But you see, I was given fair warning. It was in the leaflet. And that's discipline. Understanding the consequences of not doing what something says. This is how God often works. And the outcome is not because he's trying to be mean to us, if the outcome isn't what we had hoped in the way that we live. It's just there are consequences to not doing things the way he has told us to do them. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But discipline is training. It's all training. Divine correction provides the church with well-trained Christians. That's God's dream. A church of well-trained Christians, not fighting against what God's trying to do, but allowing God to work in our lives in a submissive, faithful way. So we need this a lot, of course, because it's also that it's not just about you. Let me draw your attention to verse 12 in particular. This hadn't occurred to me until fairly recently, the significance of this. In verse 12, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. I'd always thought of that primarily as being me being lame, and they're not disabled and healed. But actually, I think the sense is more that if we allow God to strengthen us and we get the stronger arms and the stronger knees and we have the level paths for our feet, then we can help those who are lame. We can help others who need healing. And that fits better with the rest of Hebrews, where he's talking about see to it, make sure that, and so on. Not just for you, but for the church community. And one of the reasons for us submitting to God's discipline of us is so that we will then be in a position to help other people. Your job and mine is to help the lame Christians, the Christians that need healing, which sometimes is you and I, and sometimes it's somebody else. And we swap positions through the Christian life. Sometimes I need the healing, sometimes I can help someone with the spiritual healing in some sense or other. But that's one of the reasons why attending seriously to our own spiritual discipline is so important. Because it's not just about us. It's a community. We affect everybody around us. And we have the privilege of helping other people as well. So let's help one another. Let's talk now about healthy hearts needing holiness. That's the next part of the chapter here. Make every effort to live in peace. That's a good aim, isn't it? To live in peace. Make every effort to live in peace and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. And he tells this very interesting story, or reminds them about the story about Esau right here. Excuse me. Perfect peace. How wonderful it is to have peace. I was thinking about this a lot recently, and I came across this from a book I started reading. The book is called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni, I'm not quite sure. Lencioni, okay, thank you. He's written a lot of books. Very interesting. And his most recent book talks about being a team player, essentially. And these three qualities are vital to be a good team player, to be a member of a team. If you lack any of these, you're not going to work in a team. Humble, hungry, and smart. And by smart, he doesn't mean IQ, he means emotional intelligence, effectively. Being able to get along with people and understand the dynamics of a team and how people fit together. And I really like the book, and you can read it if you like another time. But I like this thought about, I just thought about Jesus when I read this. Now, there wasn't Jesus incredibly humble? I mean, willing to sacrifice himself. Wasn't he hungry in the sense of had a real strength of desire, of mission and vision and God's will to be done and build the kingdom? I mean, he was spiritually ambitious. He was very hungry. He was also very smart in that he understood people and very empathetic and sympathetic and compassionate. And he knew how to work with a team. He had 12 apostles that seemed to go quite well. 11 out of 12 isn't too bad, right? So that team worked, and that team set up the evangelization of the entire planet. So, and it's lasted 2,000 years. So that's a pretty good team. And it made me think about church, and just generally knowing our weakness. Because none of us are equally strong in all these three areas. And part of what God does in training us is helping us to grow in our humility, to grow in our spiritual ambition, and to grow in our empathy and understanding for one another and those in the world, in the lost who need the message of the kingdom. And so I thought just an interesting exercise for yourself to do, not now, but is to go away and think about yourself. If Jesus sets the perfect example in these areas, where are you in your humility? Where are you in your hunger? Where are you in your smartness? Your levels of empathy and understanding and getting along with people, because he talks here about peace. Live in peace. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone. That's going to take humility. It's going to take a hunger to desire that peace, because I don't know about you, but when I don't feel there's peace between me and somebody, I'm often not terribly motivated to go and confront it, because I don't like confrontation. But if I'm hungry for this principle, this command, then I will push through that discomfort. That takes some humility, it takes hunger, but also being smart, understanding people and getting alongside people. And we could talk a lot about this, but I wanted to highlight it as something that helps us to have this peace with one another. And that's essential if we're going to build a church that will honor God and draw others to God. Connected with that is having a holy heart. We'll move on from that. Deadly nightshade is not something you want too much of in your garden. It's a killer, right? And he says here we've got to make sure we don't have a bitter root that grows up. This is the very definition of a bitter root. You don't want to eat the roots of this plant. 2 berries from this plant will kill a child. 2, that's all you need. Excuse me. The leaves are more potent. 1 leaf will kill you, an adult. Don't eat a leaf of this plant. It is very, very potent. In the same way, in God's church, bitterness kills. Yeah. Bitter roots kill. The bitterness towards God is not always towards people. Bitterness towards God, frustrations, disappointments with God, that bitterness. Bitterness with one another, where we hold grudges and have the assumption, have a negative assumption about someone's motives rather than giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Christians should be people who by nature give others the benefit of the doubt. Doesn't mean we ignore what we see or feel, but we by nature give others the benefit of the doubt, for that is what God does with us. All the time. We are called to pray for our enemies, not just tolerate them, but pray for them. Love them, in fact feed them and clothe them. So it's active. So pursuing peace is connected with not having a bitter root, because if we sense that there is something amiss, then we must go and do our best. As far as it depends on us, live at peace with all men, Paul writes. And that is something that will help us so much. In that way, we help reduce regrets. Esau regretted his decision. This reference to Esau doesn't mean that Esau could not have repented. Esau could have had a tremendous relationship with God. The fact that he sold his birthright wasn't going to prevent him repenting. But what was the problem was he couldn't reverse what had happened. And so I think in church, we are, in a sense, people that help each other not to have to say sorry so often for things that we've done. Of course, we're humble and say sorry when we've made a mistake, but hopefully there are less mistakes because we help one another. So a Christian, this is a thought for us to think about. A Christian is a regret reducer. We help each other reduce the amount of regret in our lives. We help each other with our parenting so that we have less regrets in our parenting when we're older. We help each other with our marriages so we have less regrets in our marriages. We help each other with our careers even, and in our relationships at work so we have less regrets about our career. We help each other even with our physical health because then we have less regrets as we get older. We help each other with our interpersonal relationships so we have less regrets. It seems to me many people that leave church and leave God are those who don't deal with their regrets, or don't have someone in their life, or they won't let someone in their life to help them deal with what they otherwise would regret. The regrets pile up and can cause bitterness. And a church is a regret-reducing community. We help each other with this. It's not me on my own, you on your own. We help each other. I do think that's a lot of what he's getting at here, where he talks about being at peace with everyone and not letting a bitter root grow up so that there is not the regrets that there otherwise could be. Thirdly and lastly, healthy hearts need humility. He draws the parallel between the mountain and the New Jerusalem here in the latter part of the chapter. You haven't come to this mountain that's all fire and lightning and trumpet sounds, and everybody basically said, God's up there, let's run away in the opposite direction as fast as possible. We don't want to be around that. And not only that, but God said, don't even touch the mountain. If you do, you'll be stoned. So let's get as far away from the mountain as we possibly can, was the goal in that circumstance. But he says, no, but you, verse 22, have come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You've come to a much better place. You've been brought near with the thousands of angels and joyful assembly, names written in heaven. You have come to God, not fled from God, come to God.
the judge of all, the spirits of righteousness made perfect. To Jesus, you've come to Jesus, who your eyes are fixed on, the mediator of a new covenant, sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. So be humble. So then listen, basically, is what he says. Remember, we need to remember. Two things we need to do. One is humble hearts, remember. He's saying, remember the mountain, remember what you've now got, and you're not running up, don't have to run from God the judge. Now you're accepted and brought near by God. Remember this. Remember what you've been given. I think this is why communion is such an important part of our community on a Sunday and weekly and frequently. I think communion matters so much because it's that point when we are collectively remembering what Jesus has done for us. And that strengthens us. So let's take communion seriously, and those who are privileged to speak about the communion, let me encourage us to make sure that we fix the collective eyes on Jesus when we speak about communion, not on us or our faults and sins and guilt that can come into it to some degree, but the remembrance is not of our sins and guilt and fear and distance from God. The remembrance is of Jesus. That's what Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. So humble hearts, remember what God has done, and also listen. As he says, don't refuse him who speaks. In verse 25, listen carefully is what he's telling us. Don't put on the ear defenders. My daughter works for a company that make protective equipment for the building industry and laboratories and things like that. So she gets me things like this for Christmas and birthday. I have quite a nice a collection now of safety equipment for my chainsaw and all kinds of things. And I love these ear defenders because it's actually really weird talking with them on because I can't hear myself. I can feel my mouth moving, but it's really incredibly powerful. So I use those when I got my circular saw or my chainsaw or something like that. And the Christian should never wear spiritual ear defenders. You got to keep your ears open, right? And we do sometimes. We don't pick up our Bible because we're afraid it's going to speak to us. Right. And we don't stop to pray just ourselves for a moment and open ourselves to God and say, God, I'm here for you, because we're afraid of what God might say. Or we miss a lesson, but we don't listen to the recording because we're like, it's probably not that important. But is it really that, or is it that we're actually worried we might get a little bit convicted? I just want to encourage us to stay close to the sources of God speaking to us. Stay close to those sources, because when God speaks to us, it changes our hearts and gives us a joy that nothing in this world can give us. There's nothing. So just to finish, we run the race marked out for us with perseverance by remembering the inspiring witnesses that are in the Bible and that we ourselves have known. People like Nigel have gone on before us. We run it with perseverance because we're inspired by Jesus. We fix our eyes on him. We run the race with perseverance because we have a loving God who disciplines us because he loves us. And we go through helpful hardships. Though they're hard, they are helpful. They develop character and Christ-likeness in us. We reap a harvest of holiness, which is a blessing to us and others as we then strengthen other people, as we love those who are lame, as we pursue peace, and as we then reduce the regret level in the church and in our own lives. This is God's vision for us. What a great God we have. How well worth it is then to heed the last verse or two here, where it says, therefore, since we're receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful. Thankfulness is at the foundation of healthiness in the Christian life. Thankful, and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. God is a consuming fire. He'll burn off everything in us that isn't healthy if we let him. Let's run the race with perseverance, and let's finish the race. Amen.
Thank you for watching and listening to this class. I do hope it's been helpful. Please let me know what you think. Leave a comment wherever you hear or see this recording, and I'll get back to you. If you have any questions, let me know. You can find out more at my website. That's malcolmcox.org. And you can send me an email from there too, if you like. Thanks very much. Take care, and God bless.